Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this session. My name is Juan Osa. I am an enterprise support lead for AWS. I've been working in IT services for over 15 years, and as part of enterprise support here in AWS, I work every day helping customers like yourselves to run your application successfully in AWS. Today, Johnny is presenting with me, so why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Johnny Hanley. I am with well-architected team from AWS. I'm a solutions architect. I've got over 20 years in IT, starting in-house most of that, and working my way up from system administrator all the way up to a director of technology. And then about 7 years ago, I joined Amazon. And so now I'm part of the well-architected team, and we're here today to talk about improving resiliency with the correction of error process. So if you're here because you want to recognize that sometimes things don't go the way you hoped, and that we want to learn from all of those times, then you're in the right place. If you are not here for the correction of error process talk, then a mistake has been made, and now's the time to mitigate that mistake. And then later you can go back and figure out a correction of error of what happened. So let's talk a little bit about this. Today we're going to go through why the correction of error process is important. We're going to talk about what a COE is. We're going to break down all the components of the COE, talk about an example scenario. Juan's going to walk you through an example scenario so you can start to feel exactly what that would look like if you were walking through the process. Then we're going to do a demo of a COE. And then we're going to take that a step further, and we're going to show you how you could use a tool inside of Systems Manager. One of the capabilities is called Incident Manager, and that allows you to go ahead and document your correction of error inside of the AWS console. Then we'll talk about how to take that the next step and cultivate that COE culture within your organization. So let's dive in. Werner Vogels likes to say that everything fails all the time. So if we know that things are going to fail and we know that stuff's going to go wrong or not according to plan, then we need to make sure that our applications are not going to be impacted by component failures underneath. Right? That's where we add some resiliency to our architecture in order to make a much better reliability for the overall application. Jeff Bezos likes to say that good intentions aren't enough. You need to have mechanisms to make anything happen. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a mechanism that we can use. At Amazon, we love to talk about flywheels, right? Trying to make something happen. In this scenario, we're going to start on the right-hand side where it says detect. So if we have an event that happens, the first thing that happens naturally is we're going to detect something that's gone wrong. That's going to happen anyway, right? We have complaints or we have some issues, and those come in, we find out something went wrong. The next thing we need to do is we want to respond to that. So we're going to go ahead and troubleshoot, we're going to try to mitigate that problem, and then afterwards we're going to learn from that. Now, we've got this little section here that talks about decoupling, right? Because we want our learning to be decoupled from the actual event. The time for analysis is not when we're having customer pain. We want to take the time to mitigate and get back to a good state first, and then afterwards, when everything's calm, we want to take the time to learn and do analysis on exactly what happened, get to not only the root cause, but any underlying dependencies, and try to learn as much as we can from that event, because we want to make sure that we don't have a recurrence. Or if it's not possible to eliminate recurrence, we want to make sure that we are as fast as we can to detect and mitigate those issues to lower any kind of customer pain. That's going to help us then to take that learning, prepare for next time, make some changes, and be ready so that if these scenarios start to present themselves again, we're ready for them. We're going to talk in a lot of depth on that today. So why is this important? Why should I care about the COE process? Some of the benefits of the COE process. Identifying the root cause and the remediation path. Like we were just talking about, that's going to happen naturally anyway, because whenever you have a problem, you have to find out that something's going wrong, and you have to mitigate it, because there's customer pain. So you're already doing that. The trick here is we want to take that knowledge, we want to make sure that we document it, and then we want to share it. We don't want institutional knowledge just within one person or one small group of people, and then should they go on vacation or should they leave the company, that institutional knowledge walks out the door. So we want to make sure that we're sharing that knowledge broadly across our team so that everybody learns from that event, and then also that we're documenting that so that we retain that over time. And then we want to implement that, and we want to go ahead and measure the improvements that we make based on the actions that we take from the learnings. Because all of this is a cycle of improvement. That's really what we're talking about. We're talking about creating a culture where we want to improve. We always want to improve. So anytime there's an event that we can learn from, we're going to take that knowledge, we're going to do analysis, and we're going to be eager to find out how we can improve. So what is this COE, right? We now know that it's important. What is it? We talked earlier about needing mechanisms, about how things don't just happen because we have good intentions. We want to make a mechanism, and this is our mechanism. We're trying to identify and fix problems, and then we want to drive ownership of the action items. We're going to go into a lot more depth on all of these, so I'm just kind of going through them high level right now, and then we'll continue to dive deeper and deeper and deeper. And we're going to maximize our lessons learned. Ultimately, that's what this is all about. This is all about any time we have an opportunity for learning to maximize and get all the information we can. Many times when something happens, we do go through the exercise of eliminating the symptoms and what we think is the root cause, and we've learned something from that, but we haven't really analyzed it and gone as deep as we can to learn about all the underlying challenges that we can learn from the event. And ultimately, we want to prevent recurrences of the problem. And again, if we can't do that, at least mitigate how much pain would happen the next time. But the trick here is we have to be very careful, because for this to work, we have to create a safe environment. We have to ensure that this is not about blame and it's not about punishment. Now that sounds easy and obvious, but it's not. The culture of that is what's going to dictate whether this is successful. Because when something goes not according to plan, right? When you have an event, people are going to be very sensitive of where that might be blamed. And so the people that are running the systems or services that are going to have the most area for improvement, that are going to have the most knowledge to be able to surface those opportunities for improvement, they're also going to be the closest to the impact from the event. And so if those people feel like there's a potential that they could be blamed or punished because of the event that happened, they're certainly not going to feel free to show all the different areas where there could be improvement. And we need those people to surface those areas for improvement. So it's really important. We're going to touch on this a couple of times. So when is it necessary? Why, when, and then we'll talk later about how. Customer impacting events. Again, this is the obvious statement. This is when we're always doing our triage anyway. But it goes deeper than that. So we have procedural misses, right? A missed test case. We have a procedure that we want to go through. We go through that procedure, and somewhere along the line, we don't do something as we had intended to, right? So we might go through and do a series of steps, and one of those steps is incorrect. So afterwards, we want to go back and figure out what we did wrong and how we can improve it. Subtly different is a process miss or a missed use case. This is a scenario where we actually did the series of steps exactly as we intended, but they didn't have the intended outcome. We had a hypothesis, we ran through that, and it turns out that it didn't do what we thought it would do. So in the same area, there's learning opportunities there. Even though we did exactly what we wanted to do, we need to learn why we thought it would have an outcome and the outcome turned out to be different. And then, of course, any opportunity for improvement. Any event that could have an opportunity for improvement, we want to dive into that and try to get all the learnings that we can, because we're trying to maximize our improvement life cycle. So who owns this? Well, the beneficiaries of lessons learned, we want to make sure they're involved, right? Anybody that can actually learn from this information and then make improvements based on it. The team where the root cause belongs, and this is what we talked about earlier, people that are closest to the event, they're going to have all of the hidden information that we need to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or at least that we're ready for it in advance. And then the opportunity for single or multiple correction of errors. So what does that mean? So as we're going through, we're going to have our initial root cause, the obvious symptom of pain. And then from there, as we begin to ask questions, and you're going to hear us go into depth on what questions we ask and how that process works. But as we go through that in depth, we're going to learn that there's a lot of underlying other areas or dependencies where we could find room for improvement. And so it might actually cascade out that even though there's one main symptom, there might be multiple areas for improvement. And those areas for improvement might be across teams. It might turn out that there's a perfect storm of 2 or 3 different things that led us to the brink, and then one last event that put us over. And so yes, we could solve the symptom on the top, but we also want to make sure that we're taking the opportunity to learn from all the other things that happened as we ask the questions, and that's going to let us put a lot more buffer between us and an outage, or us and an event. So ultimately, a correction of error is a document that we're creating, whether it be digital, physical, whatever. We're going through and we're writing what happened, right? So general tips for writing that. The first thing is we have to gather the data while it lasts. What does that mean? If you think about an event, when it happens, we've got the people that worked all night to try to mitigate and troubleshoot. We've got logs or other resources that we went ahead and used in order to figure out what happened. And so when we want to go back and look at that data and capture it for posterity, we have to make sure it's still there. Over time, people's memory starts to fade. They may not remember all the little details. Over time, based on retention policies, our logs may disappear. So we want to make sure that we go through the process with some urgency and get to all this information while it's still fresh and still available. We want to make sure we capture references. So we're going to make sure we're capturing the root cause. We're going to make sure that we're capturing and documenting any action items based on lessons learned. And we want to standardize. Our timestamps have to be standardized. And the reason this is important is as we go through, the timestamps are going to be our factual history of events. And if we want to figure out correlation, we don't want to have to try to figure out, okay, which time zone was this? Which one of these came first? So we want to standardize. We would recommend using UTC as a standard, but it doesn't matter really as long as you standardize so you can see the exact order of events. And we want to include links. As people are reading through your documentation, any links that you have to data sources makes it easier for them to dive much deeper into the actual data sources so they can get more information if they'd like. So let's dive now into the components of the COE. What exactly is this COE structure going to look like? And again, we're going to go into much more depth on each of these components. So I'm going to start with a little high level. We're going to talk about the anatomy of a COE. The first section is going to be based on supporting information. Basically, what happened. And then the second part is going to be the corrections. So the learning and the actions that we're going to take based on the analysis of what happened. So where does that start? We're going to start in the document with a summary, a high-level summary of what happened, so that if you were to read that, think of it like an elevator pitch. If you were to read that, you should know exactly what happened and all the information factually. The next thing is going to be the impact. And again, we're going to dive a lot deeper into this, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of depth now. But then that timeline that we talked about, some metrics, anything we can do to qualify or quantify exactly what happened and when, so we can see trends, not only historically, but also in the future to help us get ahead of future events. And then event questions, diving into really starting to analyze. And then the 5 whys. The 5 whys are our secret sauce. We'll go into a lot more depth on those later, but that's where you really start to continue to question at much deeper level to make sure you're not just seeing the obvious symptoms of the outage, but you're also getting much deeper into other dependencies and trying to maximize your lessons learned. From that, we're going to take some action items. What are we going to do about this going forward, right? It's all about that improvement life cycle. The action items are based on that improvement life cycle. We want to always get better. As long as we have the culture that we're embracing improvement, we're looking for those areas for improvement, we're rewarding people for surfacing those areas for improvement, we're going to continue to get better. Related items are based on, has this happened before? Is this an intermittent problem? Is this a larger scale of problems than we realize? We're trying to gather all the information we can, so we're giving relevant reference points to people, and they understand exactly what happened and what the scope is. So we're going to dive deeper into each of these, as we said. And the first is going to be the summary. We're going to write the summary last. You're going to read it first in the document, but in order to write it, we need to have all the information. So we're going to write it last. It's going to be the what, the where, and the why. It's going to tell us all about what happened, referencing the root cause, outlining all of the details. Again, this is an executive summary that we're going to use, an elevator pitch, if you will, to concisely tell you exactly what happened. If you read nothing else but that, you should get the gist of what happened. Then we're going to dive into the impact. And on the impact, we're talking about a concise paragraph on the customer impact of the event. So exactly what happened? What was the pain point that was felt? Why were we worried about this? Who was impacted? What was the customer experience? Right? Exactly what was the customer feeling? And how long did it last? Right? We really want to understand. We want to quantify everything so that we can start to understand exactly what we're talking about and the exact details of the event. We want to cast a wide net because we want to maximize the learning that we can get from these events. So let's talk timeline, some of the things we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. We want a bullet list of essential moments. We want to make sure that we know the exact moments in time that the important events were happening. Links where they're relevant to other data sources. And again, touching back on the consistent timestamps, making sure that we include our time zones and we include year. And hopefully we're standardizing on a time zone as well. We're going to highlight the critical times so that we know as events took place, we know exactly when those inflection points were. That's going to help us in the future to recognize the trends so that we can take action in the future if this were to happen again. What we don't want to do, we don't want to apply blame. Right? We're not going to use personal names. We're not going to talk about the team. We're not going to talk about anything that we think led up to this. We're dealing purely in facts. Let the facts speak for themselves. We have to be very careful not to expose any personally identifiable information. We're gathering a lot of information here. We have to make sure it's sanitized because this is going to be a document that's going to be consumed by multiple people across your organization, and so we have to make sure that it's appropriate. We want to be very careful not to be verbose, because people are going to be reading this document. We want them to be able to go through the whole document and pull the information out of it, the important action items. So we want to be very clear and crisp. And we want to make sure there's no major unaccountable gaps. Kind of like when you're reading your bank statement and there's a page and it says, this page left intentionally blank. We want to make sure that as you're going through, the reader of this document doesn't assume, I wonder what was happening in this time period. So make sure there's no unaccounted for gaps in time. So metrics, we talked a little bit about metrics. Let's dive into that. We're trying to show the impact and the recovery, and we're trying to do it in quantifiable metrics. Now, the lack of a metric is a valid action item coming out of this. Many times you'll say, well, I don't know. The reason this pain happened is because we didn't see the trend, because we didn't have metrics. And you'll see this later as we dive into this. That's valid. That might be an action item. So we always want to try to get metrics. We want to quantify this information. And if you're using graphs based on the metrics, we want to make sure, again, that we're using a consistent time scale. We're including explanations, and we're identifying critical events. So sometimes on the graph, there might be an event that happens somewhere before the graph starts to turn, and we want to make sure that we're identifying that and that we can see those trends and patterns. So now we start to talk about the analysis. We've talked before about documenting what we have. Now we're going to talk about what questions should we be asking. The first thing we have to do is we have to detect. We have to detect that there was an event, right? How do we do that? So the first thing we want to ask is, when did we learn there was customer impact? There's some way that we were told that there was a problem. So we want to know, what was that? How did we learn that this problem happened, right? So not only when was it, but how did it come to our attention? And then how can we cut the detection time in half? Again, this is all about improvement. So we want to make sure that we're cutting that time in half and we're responding faster in the future. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to diagnose what happened. So what was the underlying cause of the customer impact? Was there an internal activity that was happening? In other words, was there a maintenance window? Was there a deployment to production? Was there something happening that we could have known ahead of time that there was a higher probability that something could go wrong? I mean, what's the first thing we ask when there's some kind of an event? What changed, right? So if we know ahead of time that something's going to change, or there's a higher percentage of an event happening, we can have people prepared so that we can mitigate faster if something goes wrong. And again, how can we cut the time in half for diagnosis? And then mitigation. When did the customer impact return to the pre-event levels? Again, we're trying to understand as much as we can so we can get that learning. And how does the system owner know that the system is back to pre-event states, right? How do we know that it's restored? How do we determine where and how to mitigate the problem? Right? How do we know these things? Remember, we're doing this after the event has returned to normal. So we've already gone through some process of learning during the event to mitigate this. So we're now gathering all that information. And how can we cut that time to mitigation in half? So how can we be better next time? How can we improve? This brings us to the 5 whys, or more if you need them, however many whys you need. But again, we're starting to really dive deep and question everything. Starting off, we identify the root cause. That's what were we able to mitigate in order to remediate the symptoms. We're trying to build a causal chain. We're referencing action items. We're identifying process failures. We're going deeper into this to make sure that we understand exactly what led to this, not just the symptom itself, but any other dependencies down the chain. Again, being prepared for multiple root causes, and we want to make sure that we're concise. This isn't a time to justify. We're not here to speculate on why this happened, what team could have made it different, how, we told you so. This is all just about facts. All right, we're really documenting the facts. Nobody should be able to dispute any of these. Action items. So who's going to implement the fixes and when? So our primary objective here is to prevent reoccurrences. We're going to make sure we're coordinating with all the different owners. We're going to give out ownership for the different action items. And we want to maintain a sense of urgency because our ultimate objective here is to make sure that we are improving and make sure that if something were to happen again, we are better prepared. There's nothing worse than having action items and here's what we need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again, and then we don't take action and it happens again, and we knew what we should have done to prevent it, but we didn't do it. So we want to try to deliver our results as quickly as possible. To do that, owner and due dates are non-negotiable. So by that I mean they can change. If reality dictates that you change an owner or you change a due date, that's fine. But we want to make sure that we always have them because we have to have people accountable and timelines so that we maintain some level of urgency. And then we're looking for related items. We're looking to see, is this case related to another COE? Are there other areas of learning that we can get information from? Are there other teams that we should be giving our information to so that they can cross the information with what they're trying to gather? Did something similar happen before? Is this a series of events? And the pending actions, right? We want to try to get all the information we can. So now I'm going to hand this over to Juan, and he's going to talk all about an example scenario to try to take it from academia all the way back into something that makes more sense in reality.
Thank you very much, Johnny. Before we jump into the example of a COE document, we have a sample scenario here. It's an application we created where users upload JSON formatted files into an S3 bucket. Then that S3 bucket triggers a Lambda. The Lambda transforms the JSON file into a CSV formatted file, then upload it again to a different bucket and sends the information to a DynamoDB table. So that's the application. We have an application team. We're so excited developing it. And then they put it into production. After they put it into production, they were like checking the metrics. Everything was working as expected. And suddenly, the customers start calling the contact center indicating problems with the application. They were trying to retrieve and see the files after they uploaded. And even though the application told them they have a successful upload, they were not able to see them in the target S3 bucket. So the team started to check again. All the metrics seemed perfectly normal, so they had to do a deeper investigation. Okay? Now, service team found the problem, and all the customers were happy again, and then the service team met together to create this COE document. So as an example summary, Johnny told you, we write it last, so we will come back later. Now for the impact. Again, remember this is factual, so what was the impact? Over 10,000 files were processed, and they were not successfully transformed. The customer received a message saying that the application was working okay, but they were not able to find the files. And again, this is like time bounded. The event started at 9:38 a.m. and was resolved at 11:38 a.m. Now for the timeline. I'm not going to read the entire timeline. What I want to show you is that it's factual. We have full timestamps there with time zone, day, month, and year, and the information there is factual. There's no blame, there's no proprietary information, no personal information there, and that timeline tells the story of what happened. Now for the metrics part. Originally, the service team had this metric, the queue depth of the document to be processed and the percentage of document to be processed. And those metrics were fine during the event. Now, after the event, they proposed these two metrics, transformer lambda error rate and number of DynamoDB updates per period. Now, for the event question. Johnny, can you help me in this part?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So, Johnny, when did you learn there was a customer impact?
9:45 a.m. GMT -5.
How did you learn there was a customer impact?
The call center started to call the service team to report customers were complaining.
And now how can we cut the time to detecting half?
If we had better metrics and analytics, we would have.
And what was the underlying cause of this impact?
There was poor data validation and error exception handling inside of the application.
Okay, and was an internal activity, for example, a maintenance window, happening during this time?
Yes, there was a new application that was pushed to production.
Okay, and how can we cut the time to detecting half?
Again, if we had better metrics and analytics, we would have seen the trends happening.
Okay, and when did customer impact return to pre-event levels?
At 11:38:24, again, GMT -5.
And how does the system owner know that the system is properly restored?
Well, that was one of the challenges we had, is we just had to start asking people and hoping that we had complete information. So we need to have new metrics, newly created metrics. We're thinking that if we had a transformer lambda error rate and a number of DynamoDB updates per period, that would have given us much better understanding.
Okay, and how did you determine where and how to mitigate the problem?
We had to look through all the logs. That was one of the challenges that took us so long, because we had to literally correlate everything and try to figure out what was going on.
And how can we cut the time to mitigation in half?
If we had better metrics and analytics, I know same answer over and over, but that's what we really needed to see how to solve this problem.
Okay, Johnny, please help me again with the 5 whys part.
Sure.
So the application crashed. We all know that. But why did the application crash?
Well, the uploaded files never showed up in the application.
And why didn't the uploaded file show up in the application?
Well, the transformer lambda, it didn't update the database.
And why didn't the transformer lambda update the database?
The transformer lambda had errors during execution.
Okay, and why did the transformer lambda return an execution error?
There was invalid data types.
And why didn't the application gracefully handle the invalid data types?
Well, the application didn't even know there was an error.
And why didn't the application know there was an error?
Well, there were no metrics to capture errors in the transformer lambda data execution.
Okay, so after these 6 questions, now we have identified the root cause. Now for the action items. Again, the first action item for this event is update the runbook, so the engineers know what to do. So the owner of this action item is the service team, and it has a due date. The second action item is implementing new metrics proposed. Again, the owner is the service team, and it has a due date. The 2 metrics are the transformer lambda error rate and the number of updates in the DynamoDB per period. And the second is to update the application awareness. The first one is add error handling to the application and add input validation to the application. Related items, there are no related items for this scenario. And as an example summary, it's a paragraph that summarizes all the things that were identified and happened during the incident. After the improvement, this is how the application works. Now, Johnny, do you want us to walk through the demo in System Manager's console?
That would be great. Just switch over here. Okay, so we showed you how to capture the information, and you can do that in documentation however you choose. There are also tools that you can use to digitize and preserve that, and whichever tool you use is fine with us. If you want, there's a tool inside of AWS Console. It sits inside of Systems Manager, and it's called Incident Manager. And that's what we're going to go through today, and we're going to show you how you can preserve your information inside of Incident Manager. So if you'll notice, we got here through the console. If I go to Incident Manager and I go to Start an Incident, the first thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me for a response plan. A response plan is a template of events. There's a couple in here, but not the one that I want. So I need to go and create that first. And again, what we're doing for response plans is we're looking for a template that we're going to use for these types of events. So we're not only documenting what happened, but we're creating templates so that we can act much faster in the future. So I'm going to create a response plan for this. And I've got a name here. Now this is a technical field, so I've got to make sure that I follow the rules. So I'm going to call it a transformer lambda error. And in this field, I can put whatever I want. So I'll do the same thing, but I'll have spaces because I love spaces. Down here, it's going to show defaults. Remember, this is a template. So anytime I go to execute during an actual event, it's going to go ahead and pull from this template. So I can set up a title, a default title, which I will. And I'm going to go ahead and put just date, because I want people, when they actually do this, I want them to put in their own date. I want them to put in their own title and their own date. But if they don't, it'll have the default here. I pick a default impact, which again, they can override if they choose to. I'm going to pick critical because our customer information wasn't where it was supposed to be. And I'm going to write a little bit of a summary of what happened. So I'm going to say that customer updates were not available in the application. As I scroll further down, it's going to give me more information about, I can add some tags. There's a chat channel here, which allows me to send out notifications. And right now, it can integrate with either Chime or Slack. And so I can send out notifications through chatbots. If I go further down, I have these engagements. Now, I've pre-populated two things. You can create escalation plans, and you can create contacts. Contacts are, people that it can send out notifications to. Escalation plans also send out notifications, but they do them with time. So you can set a certain period of time after which it would escalate to the next step and send out more notifications, and you can set it up to allow it to stop the clock if it's acknowledged. Further down, we have runbooks. In Systems Manager, there's the concept of a runbook, which essentially allows you to create scripts that can run. And so this would help you with mitigation and automation. I don't have one set up here, but if we had set one up inside of Systems Manager, I could go ahead and trigger this. Remember, this is allowing us not only to document what happened in the past, but I can use this during an event in the future, so I can have these runbooks already set up if I've already determined the mitigations ahead of time. And then, of course, if I were to run that, I would need permissions. So this would be where I set the permissions. And then third-party integrations. It has the ability right now to integrate with PagerDuty. And as other third-party integrations get added, they would go there. So I'm going to go ahead and create this response plan. And now I'm in a situation where I can document an incident. So I start my incident. It asks me to choose a response plan. I'm going to choose this transformer lambda error because that's the template I want to use. Again, I'm going to put in a title. Otherwise, it would just use the default. But I want this to be specific to my event. So I'm going to put in the date, and we know that this happened on April the 1st, 2022. And I'm going to choose my impact. The default would be critical, but I'm going to put one in anyway, and it's critical because customer information is missing. So now we've started a timeline. What you'll notice is it's created some timeline of events that when we documented and started this process, but it doesn't have anything from the actual incident. If I was using this, if this wasn't the first time and I already had a template set up and I was using this during an event, then it would document some of the steps I was doing. But we want to go back and look at historically as well, and we'll do that in a minute. First, I'm going to show you the metrics. In here, I can go through and add any metrics. So it can pull from a CloudWatch dashboard, or you can make CloudWatch metrics in here. I have set up in CloudWatch, I've set up a COE demo dashboard, and inside of that, I have a call count. It's not really relevant which metric I have here, but you would set up the metrics you're going to be using, and this would allow you to start capturing metrics within this tool. The timeline we talked about. I'm going to go ahead and add some information from our timeline. So I need to go back to the day it happened on April 1st. I'm only going to put a couple of things in here so you get the idea of what it looks like. and I can describe what happened. So this is when the application was pushed to production. And again, we're going to try to capture all the steps of everything because we want that historical timeline for reference. I'm just going to add two more things. So the next thing I have is at 9:25. And this is when the engineers verified that all the dashboard information looked good. All right. And I'm just going to add one more thing that's going to get us to the actual event. But you get the idea. If you were doing this in real life, you would go through and make sure that you have meticulously added every single piece of data that you can get because we want to learn from everything we can. But since you don't want to watch me type all day, I'm not going to do that. So this is when the transformer lambda errors increased. And so you start to see that pattern of what was happening. I can also add runbooks in here. I could start a runbook or add different events in here for automation. I can go to engagements. This is where we can create those escalation plans or contact sources. So how are we notifying different people? I can set up any related items. So if I had an event that had happened in the past and it happened to be related, I could click here, and so it would link those two. And then the properties is just going to show me the Amazon resource names and the information that we've added here. Now, as I go through, I could edit any of the information that we put in originally. And when I'm done, I can go ahead and resolve this issue. And so if I resolve the incident, at that point, we're going to see in our incidents our past ones that have been resolved. There's also this concept of analysis, right? So if I wanted to do analysis, we're going to go back in, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. We can create analysis. So far we've typed in all the factual stuff. And now we want to go ahead and use this template of the analysis. And this template has some of the things we talked about, right? So we've got impact. We've got our timeline, because we already put that in. If I needed to add more, I could. We've got metrics, any metrics that would have been captured here from what I added in CloudWatch. And then we have another layer where we start to ask those questions. This is some of the other things we talked about with the analysis. How could we improve the detection time? And so these are the questions about the detection, the diagnosis, the mitigation, right? These things that we talked about and how we can document the improvements. Any related items can be linked here, and then action items as well. Under the questions, there should also be, if we went down further, there's also the 5 whys, right? So this is going to allow us to document our process of digging down and getting the information we need. Again, then we're taking our action items, which is the learnings, documenting those, and we can even create action items and resolve them when they're finished. So this is a place that you can document, and you can use Incident Manager within Systems Manager to document your correction of error. So I'm going to switch us back now to our presentation. And we're going to talk about cultivating the COE culture. So what's the next step that we start to take, right? Here's where we want to say, we've already created this COE process, and we have some subject matter experts that are really good at it. They're executing this. How do I scale this within my organization? How do I make this much broader, and how does it scale? So we're going to start by creating a community of practice. And what do we mean by that? So it's not enough to just have one area where you have some experts that are going to understand the process. You've got to get that expertise out to the community. And so if you have a large organization, we have to start to put experts or liaisons close to the people that are going to need the information. So that's what this is all about. The first thing we want to do is establish a community for those early adopters, those people that are super passionate about this process and have already been doing it. And so once we have this community, we're going to try to help them communicate together. Perhaps this is setting up Slack channels. Perhaps this is setting up other mechanisms for communication. And when we do that, it's going to start to foster the informal sharing of these lessons learned. So our subject matter experts are going to start to communicate, learn together, and they're going to start to share. And as they do that, they'll start to formulate best practices. They'll start to document and share all this information. So once we standardize all of these best practices, then we can start to share that learning throughout the organization. So how do we do that? The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start to identify champions. And we talked about having to put the information closer to the people who need it. And that's how we're going to do it. We're going to have champions within the organization that are all on different teams that are volunteering to learn more about this correction of error process and kind of be these champions embedded in the organization. More of a grassroots. They're going to have direct access to the document repositories and the subject matter experts. We're then going to train the trainer. So our subject matter experts are going to train our champions so they have more information, so they are better to service the people in their teams. We're also going to allow them direct access back to the subject matter experts, so anytime there is something that they can't resolve or they need to escalate, they have the ability to escalate back to the subject matter experts. And this allows us to continue to improve the process. So they continue to learn when different problems arise. They continue to learn and they continue to educate the people in their field, and everybody becomes much more comfortable. So what have we learned today? Right? We talked about what a correction of error is, why it's really important to have a culture for improvement and wanting to learn from any time you have something that didn't go according to plan. This is going to help facilitate us always getting better. But we have to have that right culture in order to do it. We have to make sure there's no blame, and we have to make sure that everybody is rewarded for bringing forward areas for improvement. After that, we talked about how we would do that and who would be part of that process. We talked about, whether or not we would have what types of incidents would require a COE. And then we talked about what a COE is. Broke down the components, went through all the components, and then ultimately showed you how to scale that. So I want to thank you. I would ask you all to complete your sessions. Those are our ways to improve. We take all of that data, we learn what we did well, we learn where our areas are for improvement, we do our own COE and try to be better for the next time we do these talks. So please, please, please fill out your surveys and let us know how we did. I want to thank you very much for joining us. I hope you're all having a fantastic reInvent, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're on social media, so feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter.